How does raising interest rates do so much damage to the economy, to you, to the market? First, you need to understand what an interest rate actually is. An interest rate is the rent you pay to borrow money or the rent you earn from lending money to someone else. If you're a borrower, high rents suck. If you're a lender, high rates also suck. Why? Because it's way harder to find a willing borrower. No one wants to borrow money when there's high rates. So the Fed sets these rates for the US. Every other rate in the country, from your mortgage to your credit card, is correlated to the main interest rate set by the Fed. So when the Fed cuts interest rates, it becomes cheaper to borrow and easier to lend money. Money then just flows through the system freely. There's money everywhere. Everyone's getting loans. When the Fed hikes interest rates, it becomes more expensive to borrow and harder to lend. Money in the economy gets restricted. It just, no one can borrow, no one can afford to borrow, no one's lending out. So how does it work exactly? Well, if the Fed holds rates at 4%, I know I can buy government bonds, which are essentially me lending the US money and collecting rents for it, and they pay me 4% interest. Easy money. I lend my money to the US government, they pay me 4%. So if you want low risk, steady returns and the government is paying you 4%, you just chuck your money in bonds. You lend it to the government, you don't have to deal with the stress of the stock market. And the higher that interest rate goes, the less attractive stocks become because they are risky. If interest rates were 10%, why would anyone have any incentive to put their money in the S&P 500 when they could just collect 10% risk-free by lending it to the government? That in a nutshell is how interest rates impact the stock market. How do they impact you personally? Well, that one's simple. In the 1980s, which is the last time the Fed went on a crazy rate hike spree to fight inflation, it hurt a lot of people. They've obviously raised rates since the 1980s, but that time was absolutely crazy. I'll explain it. So back then, Paul Volcker was the chair of the Fed. Throughout the 70s, inflation had grown to over 10% and people were struggling. I think it peaked at 14.8%. Now, Volcker became Fed chair and he had a plan to fix it. He said, we're going to fix inflation. How did he fix it? He jacked up interest rates to 20% by June of 1981 and the market got crushed. But the effect on the middle class was even worse than the market. Your mortgage went up to 19%. Businesses could not afford to borrow money, so they stopped growing and they had to fire people. The unemployment rate went up to 10%. There were mass protests, death threats against Volcker. These days he's seen as a hero because he did in fact break the back of inflation. That's what people say. He drove it down from 14.8% in March of 1980 to 2.5% by August of 1983. Right now, conditions keep pushing us towards that 1970s style America. The same conditions that bred Paul Volcker. Quick thing before you go, I've written a free guide called How to Retire Before 2036. It's a full 10-year plan for anyone starting late. Get out of debt, invest properly, retire on time. Free download, link in the description.